Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Ramya Karnam and I work as Director Sales at Suneratech Technologies. And we are here for the webinar on the topic Accelerate Your Cloud Transformation Journey with Intelligent Automation Testing, presented by Suneratech Technologies and Estes Express Lines. I'll be your moderator today for the webinar. Few housekeeping rules. Audience will be on mute throughout and questions will be taken up in the last 10 minutes. Please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section whenever you have one. Adar Devro, Director Quality Engineering from Suneratech, will be your host today for the webinar, and we will start off with the agenda and introductions of the speakers. Without further delay, let's begin the webinar. Over to you, Art.
Thanks, Ramya. And first off, thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join us for this session. We want to go over a quick real agenda. So I'm going to introduce obviously myself. We'll talk with our partners and friends at Estes Express. And today on tap for the webinar is going to be, we're going to talk a little bit about industry trends. The Estes team is going to talk about their cloud journey, the challenges and benefits of moving to the cloud, and some cloud automation. We're going to have a panel discussion between my Estes partners and myself. We'll jump into a cloud tester demo and introduction, and then we'll have a Q&A basically for the last 10 minutes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay. So as Rami had noted, my name is Art Devro. I am Director of Quality Engineering here at Suneratech. Been in the kind of the testing game for about 20 years now, and really working with customers of cloud applications and the like in terms of their automation journey. So Arun, would you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Arun Ramachandran. I am the Oracle product manager, program manager and I also manage the IT team here at Estes. I was responsible for the implementation of the solution back in 2016, working really as a PM on the onboarding. And since that, now I manage the team as well as other responsibilities. Eddie?
Hi, I'm Eddie Waugh. I report to Arun, and I work on IT team here at Estes. And I came to Estes about 6 years ago as a contractor to help support IBM iSeries applications while they were doing the conversion to Oracle. After the conversion completed, I became also an Oracle support person, and later became an employee. So I've been working with Oracle now for about 4 years. In this project, I'm working with coordinating the implementation effort between Suneratech and Estes, and working with the teams here at Estes to provide all the necessary information.
Great. Thanks, Arun. Thanks, Eddie. And really appreciate you guys taking time out to join us for this today. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to talk about within the presentation is I want to kind of talk a little bit about industry trends. Over the last couple of years, obviously, COVID has had a huge impact on all businesses across the globe, and particularly in the IT space when it comes to basically cloud utilization. So as you can see here from this Flexera report in 2021, basically when you look across kind of enterprise or small business segments, the addition or adoption rate of cloud applications, cloud services, et cetera, has really increased. And as you can see here, cloud organizations that are moving to the cloud have basically identified that that movement or migration to the cloud is significantly higher than they actually had planned prior to the pandemic. So it really is kind of signifying that the cloud, while it was popular, is gaining more and more traction as the workforce changes, as the environment changes, and the ability of organizations to kind of work in a dispirited or not dispirited, but a distributed manner. Okay. If we look at kind of the spending on cloud services, it's grown significantly since 2020. you're at about $313 billion in total market spend across all of the services, whether that's business process as a service, platform as a service, SaaS solutions, et cetera. And that's going to just continue to accelerate, right? As we move into 2020, we're looking at close to $500 billion, $482 billion, per Gartner, in terms of what the expected spend on cloud services is, right? So it's obviously it's the wave of the future. It's here. It's grabbing hold. It's anchoring itself. These cloud services. But with that, right, the reason that organizations are moving to the cloud is there's significant benefits from being in the cloud. There's also new responsibilities, right? So if we look at some of what those benefits are, right, when you're on the cloud, whether it's a SaaS solution or a PaaS solution, right, you basically get to take advantage of the continuous innovation that these commercial products and providers are providing to the marketplace. They give you predictable timelines and schedules for upgrades and deployments and enhancements. It allows your organization, your business users, et cetera, to really focus on what their core business value is and not worry about software upgrades, things like that. And again, you're getting faster delivery of new features and modules, improvements and fixes, right? So you don't have to worry about lengthy development cycles that may have been something of the past when you had an on-prem type of solution. And it really is that stepping stone to that digital transformation and innovation that all companies are seeking. However, with those benefits comes some new responsibilities, right? So organizations now have to really figure out a way to keep pace with the pace of change. So again, these cloud applications, you're getting continuous innovation, continuous delivery, regular cadence of releases. However, now you have to keep up with that pace of change. You have to have mechanisms and resources in place to handle change management. You have to plan for those frequent releases, right? So these commercial products in the marketplace are being delivered potentially quarterly, semi-annually. Some of these are providing weekly releases to their clients as well, so they can adopt new features and functions at a really extreme accelerated pace. However, there's a considerable amount of planning and resource planning and the like that goes along with that speed of innovation that's being delivered, right? Your organization has to really have a good idea of understanding, how do you adopt these new features and functions? How do you plan for the adoption of them? How do you roll them out? How do you validate them? How do you make sure that they're delivering the value to your organization? And that takes a tremendous amount of man hours and input from customers of these, particularly these cloud applications. Okay. You obviously have to worry about maintaining continuity of application, and there's a large continuous regression effort that comes with being a customer on the cloud, whether that's a SaaS solution or a PaaS solution. Many organizations kind of go into this thinking, hey, we'll move to the cloud. It'll save us money. It'll make life easier for us. However, part of these new responsibilities do entail that once you've implemented and you've gone live, you need to make sure and continue with every patch release and every delivery of the new features and functions that your core implementation remains intact from release to release, right? So if we talk about that from kind of a purely from a testing perspective, right? Because that's, basically my area of focus. What are the options that you have available to you, right? You can continue to test manually, really, which is kind of, hey, a lot of organizations, when they first decide to move to the cloud, this is kind of the path they take. They say, we're just going to continue to test manually. However, with the pace of change that you see with these cloud providers, it's very time consuming. And oftentimes they're not giving their customers a very large testing window to go through their validations that they'd like to, right? So then what ends up happening, is you find that you have some coverage that's not as comprehensive as you thought it might be. You may have some areas within your organization that don't have the resources available to test. Or you're relying upon, kind of non-traditional testers, so to speak, to pick up the bulk of that testing load. You're relying on your business users, your subject matter experts within these applications, and not maybe a formally trained IT group or quality assurance organization, right? And then you have to also focus on, basically what changes do you have to accept, right? With these cloud solutions and cloud providers. With each of the patch releases, there's going to be some changes that are going to be mandated that their customers take, and others that are new features that they can basically disable. When you go through that process, in addition to the regression testing, you also have to work through the, hey, what do we have to take that the cloud provider is mandating that we take? right? So all of those are burdens on your organization that many folks and teams don't realize they're going to have to take on. So what are your options if you don't want to test manually, if you want to continue to evolve? You can build your own automation suite, right? And this is obviously a very popular option. Many software development organizations leverage automation a great deal. It's a very valuable resource. But then if you look at building internally, you basically have to worry about licensing costs. You have to have a team of resources that are basically subject matter experts in that automation, whatever tool it might be. Basically, they're going to be software engineers. You have to build a framework. So they have to have the skills and the tool, and they have to be able to maintain those, right? And if we think about traditional automation, where you bring in a tool, you set up a framework, your automation time to get up and running, your lead time is really about 3 to 6 months before you have a kind of a fully functional suite. But at that point, your work is not done. There's still care and feeding that's involved with any automation tool that you bring in. So with every release, there's going to be maintenance of those scripts. You're going to obviously want to be able to maintain those scripts and rerun them in a very quick manner. All of these are challenges of implementing an automation as a tool that's available. Some organizations do it well, but others continue to struggle with it. Okay. And then the last option is you can subscribe to automation as testing as a service, right? And that's really kind of the new way of thinking about it. Very low low to no software licensing costs, right? Low to no hardware or that's software costs, et cetera. And since you're subscribing to testing as a service, you don't really have internal resource costs that you have to worry about. Most of the testing as a service products are really subscription and consumption based. Normally you enter into annual contracts with this sort of service provider, and you would leverage their expertise in software automation, and 2, with the product that you've implemented, their expertise there, and allow them to basically act as your automation arm. And let them basically handle the automation, the maintenance of those scripts, and the execution of those once you get into your patch testing windows, whatever those may be. So really kind of a more holistic solution, and one that we'll talk a little bit more as we proceed into the webinar. Okay. So how can you leverage automation to accelerate your cloud adoption, right? And it's really kind of focused in a couple different places. It's about increasing your velocity. Whenever you're in a software development environment, right, increasing velocity is one of the terms that you're going to hear consistently. How do we go faster? And one of the ways, and probably the biggest way that organizations can move faster and increase that velocity is through automated testing, right? It reduces cycle times. It finds issues and defects earlier in those cycle times. If you find a defect early in your testing cycle, it's much, much cheaper to fix. Right. And it gives you the ability to adapt change. So you have agility there. So as changes are coming, because they are going to come, and they are going to come on a consistent basis, your automation suite will allow you to really adapt to that change that's coming at a rapid pace, right? Because you're then going to focus on what's changing and not this huge regression effort that you have to go through with every deployment. Gives you the ability to maintain quality, right? I just touched upon it. Quality comes at a cost, and poor quality comes with a great cost. So the earlier you can find issues, if you find them in a development or test environment, they are much, much cheaper to fix than if they basically escape that testing environment and make their way into production. Okay, that's when you're really in emergency mode. If that defect does escape that testing window. Okay. Obviously you want to improve your user confidence as well. Your organizations, I come from an environment within the app dev space, and that user confidence is always something we struggled with when we didn't have automation in place to support our activities, right? So having that confidence of your core user group is huge. It makes life much, much better when you have a good, trustful relationship between your IT organization and support organizations and your business users, okay? And then lastly, it gives you the ability to lower some costs, right? Because you don't have a large pool of manual testers, for example, who are on the payroll, who are working through continuous testing efforts on a manual basis. Okay, so real quick, that's kind of the industry trends in a nutshell that we wanted to cover. And at this point, though, I would like to talk with Arun and have Arun introduce Estes to the world here and talk about their cloud automation journey, and then we'll go on. Okay, Arun?
Hello. Thanks, Art. So yeah, a little about Estes here. We're proud to be. We're happy to be part of this conversation. I think we got a good story to tell. We're Richmond-based national trucking firm. We're as it says here, we're the largest privately owned company. One thing I'm really happy about working with Estes is, our management is very progressive. They listen to us. In addition to, moving to HCM, I mean, we're really looking to try to optimize a lot of our internal solutions. We can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Again, showing we're national organization here.
Okay.
List of our terminals. And so here about our journey. So as I mentioned, or well, I guess I will mention here, we began that journey in 2016. I was the PM on that effort with the boarding. So I've basically been there since inception. We started with ERP. We were a multi-pillar implementation, started with ERP. And then we did HCM later that year in July is when we launched it of 2016. Since then, we have, and again, I guess the modules, just to list them. So for ERP, it's the GL cached AP and fixed assets. For HCM, it was basically benefits, HR and payroll is what we implemented there. And then since then, we've implemented the CDM and procurement modules. So, why were we looking to implement some type of automation testing? The reality is, I think, you boarded, we're thinking, oh yeah, the implementation partner gave us all of these test scripts. They explained to us, hey, after every upgrade, you're going to have to execute these scripts, regression scripts. We thought we had it all down. The reality is, as you get further and further, I think we were identifying that maybe less regression testing was being done. Again, no one was doing this intentionally. The reality is, the business is trying to manage their day job. When the upgrade comes, they're trying to learn as much as they can about the new features, and regression testing seems to be sort of the last on everyone's priority. We as an organization, we were looking to really save our business users time. A lot of people are looking at automation as a way to reduce headcount. That wasn't our goal. We're like, we're going to keep our same employee base, but we want to basically let them focus on what's most important. That's why we decided to automate. And in the end, that gives us, lets the business focus on running payrolls. We have a weekly payroll. We have, a small payroll team. There's probably 10, 15 people in there, but they're responsible for running payroll for a company of over 21,000 people. It's weekly. There's 9 payrolls. There's a lot of moving pieces, as you can imagine. But what's great here is every regression test now we get consistency. We're saving all of our teams about 450 hours of man work, which is huge. We're getting consistency. We're able to regression test across multiple browsers. That's something when we manually test, we never did. We did one browser on the desktop. That was it. Now we've seen that we have quite a bit of activity on the mobile side. So now we run tests on desktop, Android and iOS platform. I mean, that's something we couldn't do manually. It's just too much to juggle. And just again, I talked about some of the high level goals that we were looking for. I think Eddie's going to talk now a little more about, from an implementation perspective, what he was looking to get out of it and how that went. So Eddie.
All right, thank you. And so I've just got some kind of topics to hit on. So prior to going live with running actual test cases to do this instead of our own people doing manual testing, we had sort of a set of things that occurred. So for us, at the beginning, Sunera asked us for any documentation we had made of customizations to the user interfaces so that they would understand any flow changes that were different from out of the box Oracle. And that was probably real important for them because we had made a fair amount of specific flow changes to some of our screens. So it was good for them to know that information ahead of time. Sunera provided us with sample test cases and some examples of how to give them test steps, what kind of information they needed from us in order to create these test cases. They gave us an example of what a test script execution result would look like, so we would know the details that we would get from running the test with them, which is quite detailed. It basically lists every step through the entire test, every keystroke and every screen that was hit, and gives you the results with each individual step along the way. They also gave us a shared OneDrive folder where all of the documentation could be stored, whether it was documentation they were providing or documentation we were providing to them. It was all in one nice central location. So test case results could be put there, example test scripts could be put there. Anything we needed to put there, we could store there, and that was provided by Sunera. One of the things we had to take into account was we have 3 test environments, so we had to choose a test environment to use. And we stick with that. We chose one that we thought would be the best choice for them, that wouldn't have been altered much, so that things would be consistent from quarter to quarter. And we only use that one test pod with Sunera. So they needed some test profiles set up there for their staff to use. So they gave us a list of roles that they would need us to give them access to so that they could access the HCM, ERP, and CDM modules. So we set those profiles up. Basically, there were 2 profiles that we needed to set up that had a fairly large access profile, much like any of our IT support staff has. So we gave them 2 of those. And then we also set up a few special profiles that we found out would be more helpful for running payrolls, that would mimic the actual payroll users' access, so that we were sure that whatever testing they did mimicked what our real payroll users are doing, and there wouldn't be any chance that something worked differently because the authorities were different. Then we met with the Estes departments to get all their initial test cases to onboard. And mostly that it consisted of some Word documents, some Excel spreadsheets that were more or less bullet lists of tests to be performed that our teams had been performing manually. Most of those did not have a lot of detail, except for perhaps running the payrolls. Those were in detail. So we provided that information to Sunera, and then they analyzed those test cases that we gave them and said, okay, we know Oracle, we're subject matter experts. We understand what you're doing with this test without you providing full detail. The only thing we really had to give them in those cases was, if we wanted to run it for a specific information, a specific employee, or, certain things selections you wanted to make in the test. In most cases, they were able to onboard those test cases with fairly minimal input from us. There were obviously the ones that were real specific, that we wanted to test something very specific. We had to give them documents, Word documents typically, with step-by-step instructions, and screenshots were helpful. So they could onboard those in a timely manner. Then each period, we get a nice detailed regression test plan from Art. He does a great Excel spreadsheet that lists all the test cases. They've got numbers, they're by module. It's real easy to sort if you want to. It really gives us the whole layout of exactly what's going to be tested. These are all the cases we've got to test, and they can go through them and put the test number on the results, put them in our shared folder. We can go grab them and review them. It really works well. And Art does an excellent job of giving us test plan feedback and keeping us up to date on what's going on. Also, Sonera gave us a payroll validation tool, or the PVT. They demoed that for us and showed us how to use it, where you could compare payroll results before the upgrade. You could take it, I believe it's a payroll, some sort of payroll detail report. I forget the name of it.
Activity report.
And payroll activity report. Thank you. And you can compare, take that and load it into the payroll validation tool. Then after the upgrade, you can run the payroll and get that same report for the same payroll, and the tool can compare them and tell you any differences that exist. That'll help you find maybe something that's changed as a result of the upgrade. It'll tell you if there's any kind of differences in the amounts, even down to the to the individual employee and that sort of thing. And then we didn't do this up front, but I'm throwing it in here because it would be my recommendation to do it up front. But at a later date, we found that we had so much communications going back and forth by email between Estus and Suneratech. So we wanted to make sure we didn't leave people out. So at Art's suggestion, we created an email distribution list, and so Suneratech set one up to send to people, or so they set one up for us to use to email them. We set one up for them to email to us, so that all the departments and the SMEs got information. Nobody got left out. So my recommendation is do that up front. It's been really, really helpful. So going from there, we actually began with sort of a phased approach. So our first test cases were implemented with Oracle Release 21B, which would have been the second quarter of 2021. So we did the initial onboarding with all the HCM, ERP, and CDM module tests that they had that they wanted us to automate. And so payroll, HR, benefits, procurement, CDM, and a little bit of employee self-service was onboarded. It was a rather, in my opinion, it was kind of a really big undertaking to try to do all of that in one fell swoop. But we did provide additional details for, special UI flows and screenshots and such to get those onboarded. It would have been more beneficial if we'd have had a full quarter of 3 months to do that. I think we only had about a month and a half or 2 months total to onboard those. So we were kind of aggressive there with right many test cases. It was a lot of work. No, I won't lie to you there. Especially mainly because none of us were totally sure in the beginning, who needed what, and so it was a lot of work, but it all came together by the time it was time to run the tests. So we did set up test cases that are repeatable. We try to make sure that they're repeatable data and input, whatever the test is going to be. Make sure that you can use that same test quarter after quarter without having to update the information saying, oh, this time you need to run it for a different input data. So that's something to try to make sure you do. We have a couple of things like that may vary sometimes, where we've used specific employees that we wanted to test. Occasionally those employees are no longer with the company, so we have to come up with a new employee to test. But these are things we try to keep track of, and somebody reminds us if those have changed. In the first phase, IT was very heavily involved with coordinating the test cases, the documentation, the onboarding, testing, reviewing the tests, getting the sign off on the test case setup. We were the middleman, so we did a lot of coordinating, trying to get everybody used to the flow of doing this. So it was between, mainly I was sort of the middleman for the most part, although we did divide up with our own IT staff. We kind of assigned each person that we could one of the modules. So somebody had payroll, somebody had benefits, somebody had procurement, and tried to coordinate all the test cases information so that nobody was overwhelmed. But I sort of tried to coordinate all of that in the total. So we ended up having daily stand-up calls with Suneratech to clarify any issues we were having. When we set up the test cases, we included everybody if necessary from the Estus and the Sonera side so that we could test everything, get any issues or on things that were not cleared up. And we did that pretty much throughout the entire first phase, getting all the test cases onboarded. Sonera did offer us, and in the first phase, we did have Sonera present new release meetings where they covered all of the changes that were coming in the new release. So they went through those by module. We met with, the appropriate team at Estes and the appropriate teams at Sonera to review all the new things that were going to be provided in the new release. So everybody was knowing what to expect. So in phase 1 for 21B, and in total, we ended up onboarding 95 test cases, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was a lot to get going. A lot of those had a fair amount of detail in them because they were very specific tests. So we did onboard for core HR and employee self-service, for benefits, payroll, procurement, and CDM. So we ended up with a total of 95 for the first phase. When the quarterly upgrade actually occurred and we ran those test cases, we did, again, IT did coordinate those tests, any issues that came up with the test cases. Most issues were just around an invalid selection was made on the case. So the result wasn't quite what we were expecting, or it hung up. Occasionally, some of the users requested something to be changed at the last minute. So that whenever something like that came up, we cleared it up real quickly. Sonera reran the test with whatever the change was necessary, and continued if more than once was necessary, which generally it wasn't. But if necessary, they were great about rerunning the test, given the final test results. So we had everything done at the end. IT coordinated a sign-off. There's a sign-off spreadsheet that we get for all the test cases, and Estes signs off on them that they've all passed and they're all what was expected. And if there's any issue with any of them, we can put the information in the sign-off spreadsheet saying this case has whatever the issue is, and Sonera will look at that issue, rerun the test, and give us a clean test to review. At the end of it all, we did do a follow-up with the Estes teams for feedback on how they thought the first phase went. It was mixed bag. Some people were feeling that it was kind of stressful. They had a hard time getting all the information together. It was because we kind of squeezed it in on a tight time frame. But overall, they were real happy with the results. Some of the teams had really great luck with their test cases. Their test cases were real straightforward, went through the first pass, everything was great. So, depending on the complexity of the test cases, but overall, everybody was great with it. So then in phase 2, that was 21C, third quarter of last year, we brought on their first test cases for the finance module. And that included, as mentioned earlier, general ledger, accounts payable, and fixed assets. They were not in the first phase because they had year-end stuff going on that they did not want to participate, so they didn't join until phase 2. We added some more test cases for HR, payroll, and employee self-service because once our teams were finding out what they were getting back from this and the time it was saving them, and they said, oh, let's bring some more on. So we brought more on for those groups. Again, IT worked as a coordinator, much like in phase 1, but mainly focused on the new test cases, not so much the older ones that we'd already onboarded. So we pushed the user departments to work directly with Sonera, that's the SMEs, for any changes or issues in testing. So at that point, we had our departments actually emailing or phone calling back and forth directly with their Sonera SME, kind of leaving IT more out of the picture. We're trying to turn that over, transition it to them so they could be the people actually working directly with Sonera and leave the middleman out, get things done quicker. So we stepped away from doing daily stand-up meetings like we did in the first phase, and went pretty much to an email or phone call feedback type situation. And Estes people were really much happier going that route because they felt like the stand-up meetings, consumed a little too much of their day's time. And this way they only had to be involved when there was some specific need on their specific test cases. So that was a good move for us. IT did coordinate the sign off again with the feedback between Estes and Sonera for the test cases and make sure that everybody did their sign offs like they were supposed to. Again, all the information is saved in shared folders. We get a new one each quarter, so there's no confusion. In phase 2, we did add a total of 46 new test cases for the finance group. And we did, in the first phase, we had only done 2 of our large payrolls. As Arun mentioned, we have 9 payrolls that we do weekly. In the first phase, I think we had only done the 2 large ones and 1 small one. In the second phase, we added all the remaining payrolls. So that really boosted up our test case count, because if it's a simplified payroll, we basically have 1 test case. If it's the larger payrolls that have a lot of steps to them, there's as many as 21 test cases for a single payroll. So once we onboarded all those, we ended up with a grand total test cases of 286. So that was a big jump from the 95 test cases in phase 1. We were up to 286 in phase 2. So when we did actually run the live quarterly upgrade testing, the IT basically, again, just coordinated any issues that came up. There were only a couple, there weren't very many at all. We'd done a lot of testing and test cases were smooth. The only real changes I think that we ran into was, and here's the purpose of regression testing, we found some UI changes Oracle had made. So, when the screen flows had changed, we had to make a little adjustment to the test case to make it work. Also, we found out that we've done some customizations on some of the screen flows. If Oracle has made any UI changes, those changes caused our changes to be lost. So we had to reinstate the changes. Hence the reason for regression testing. You get all that fixed before you go live, or once you go live, you got to run in and make those changes to get it back to the way Estus wants it. So again, here's where regression testing and having these test cases run for us helps us out a lot. Again, we coordinated the sign off for the feedback with Estus to Sonera. And again, we followed up with the Estus teams. Now, after the second phase, the Estus teams were way more positive about everything. They were really happy with these test cases being run. It saved them the time. A number of the departments said, okay, my tests all passed. I'm not looking at anything. I'm not going to check the test results any further. They passed. I'm good to go. So they're saving the maximum time. A few of our teams still like to review the test results just to verify that the feedback we got agrees with what they were expecting, mostly on the more complicated tests. But everybody's been really happy how much time it's saved them now. So then phase 3 was with 21D, the 4th quarter of last year. We had our first test cases for employee self-service, where we were using mobile devices, again, the Apple and Android. We had a few manager self-service things we brought on board. So those were the only real new test cases we brought on, but mobile testing was our first shot that go around. All the other departments were pretty happy with that they had all the test cases they needed on. So far, they haven't asked for any additional ones, but we leave it wide open every time so they can bring us new tests they want to add. We did find one situation where our payroll department had a lot of tests they wanted to run. Many of their staff wanted to run basically the same test, but with different data that is in their functional area. So some of those test cases basically looked alike. So it was kind of hard to find the right one that you wanted in the test results file. So Sonera worked with us and we renamed the test cases so they had a little piece of the name of the test case included the user's initials, so they would know which ones to go grab. That resolved a huge problem with us figuring out how to sort out the test cases between the users. So again, Sonera worked with us and renamed the test cases to match what our need was. In the third phase, IT basically only was involved to push and remind the teams to do their sign-offs and update the Suneratech sign-off spreadsheet. The issues resolution, of which there were hardly any, was going to be direct with email or phone calls between the SMEs on either side. So for phase 3, we added 30 new test cases. So now we have a grand total of 316 test cases that Sonera is running for us. We were planning to have a phase 4 with release 22A in February, but Oracle postponed our 22A, so we're not going to have anything. We didn't have anything to do in February since we didn't go on 22A yet. So at this point, we're all caught up and good to go on that. Just a couple additional things to note. Suneratech gave us some real specific SMEs to work with on their end. We've been real consistent with the same people every quarter, so it's not changing all the time. We've got the same folks to communicate with, so we've got, they know us, we know them, and we communicate directly with them, and it's remained very constant. It's been very, very helpful to have that consistency. One other thing that we found is necessary, we do a P to T in our test pod to refresh it from production about a week or two prior to receiving the quarterly upgrade in that test pod. That way, Suneratech doesn't have any issues repeating the same test cases with the same employee numbers and data like that. That if they had done that test the previous quarter and we hadn't done a refresh, then they wouldn't be able to run that same test because that test has already been performed and it may not work correctly. So doing a P to T in the test pods right before the week or two before the upgrade makes that work so smoothly. Something to keep in mind. That's about all I had to say. So if I've left out anything, Art, please ask me.
No, all good, Eddie. You did a great job. I think you covered everything. So thank you very much. Arun, did you want to talk a little bit about kind of some key events around, particularly on the payroll stuff real quick?
Yeah, no, and I know, ignore the slide. There's a lot of detail here, but I guess for those of you who are payroll customers, you probably see this. I mean, there's a lot of, regulatory updates that we're required to take in addition to the quarterly upgrades. So anyone who's a payroll customer understands that. And the reality is that, I don't think we really did any testing. Before Suneratech, we really didn't do any testing for those regulatory updates. We did have a situation once where regulatory update, and this was before our relationship with Suneratech, in a non-quarterly upgrade, like I said, a regulatory update, I believe it was in December, there was something that changed, and for us, we couldn't run our payroll. And so then, obviously Sev 1, huge crisis, trying to get, these 9 payrolls out, and we can't complete a payroll. That's a huge issue. The PVL tool that Suneratech has it would actually be a safeguard. I think that would have helped us in that situation. So really excited about that. We need to do a better job communicating to our payroll team the value to that tool. You do get to run it an unlimited number of times. So I would, and I think Suneratech, you recommended it as a best practice to use that on the regulatory updates. We just need to get better adoption there, but really happy. The end story is we're getting consistent testing. We're doing, we're making sure that we test and it's the same test, every result. One plus, to Eddie's point, is the level of detail we get, because all the test scripts are timed. So I can basically look at the summary that Art gives us at the end, and I can do a couple quick calculations off that, and I basically figure out the total release time per, for all of our scripts, and we can basically use that as a baseline. And I think Suneratech, you guys do capture that. So basically, if there's a significant jump in some process, another opportunity is when I look through some of those, again, 300 and X number of test scripts, you're not going to be able to. But if you have a really long running process, it basically, the detail they give you is helpful. Probably if you need to open up an SR, you've got some process that's just taking hours, and you can show it's consistently doing it across multiple scripts. I just think that the data they provide is really valuable. That's just another plus of having, we wouldn't have thought of, calculating all those times, but when you have it, you're like, whoa, I should be doing something with this. So it's really valuable. So that's it on this slide. I think on the next slide just shows, I think, some of the other advantages that we wanted to just call out, see if we missed anything.
Yeah, Arun, I don't, that one's not here. I'm going to leave it in the deck when we send it out. That slide will be in there as well.
Yeah, no problem. But like I said, it's overall, it's really happy with it. The solution, I think the mobile thing is a big win for us. We just implemented and this is what's really nice. Eddie called it out, where if you have customizations, you want to make sure they didn't break. It's so helpful to be able to have the script tell you in the test environment that something broke because of an upgrade. So you have time to respond and it's not a fire. So it gives you peace of mind.
Great. So I do, you guys touched on a lot, and I do appreciate all the detail. I just wanted to ask a couple quick follow-up questions. We had talked, and Arun, you had, as our relationship has evolved, you kind of had talked a little bit about, anytime you engage with a new service provider, right, there's always going to be some level of apprehension. You're trying to feel each other out. You're trying to understand how each other works. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of that, the things that we discussed, some of the apprehension on the Estes side, and kind of how we overcame that? Because I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, Eddie, I think the fact that you had SMEs for each of the modules really gained the trust and the confidence of our business users. One of the things they were really concerned was that as they handed over their scripts, oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to spend hours out of my day explaining them about Oracle and how to execute. And I think just having people who are knowledgeable in the subject matter was really beneficial. It started to build that trust in the relationship. Again, there's always the concern that, there's going to be the language issue in terms of, you've got a combination, a mix of resources, onshore, offshore. Is there going to be an issue in the communication? But I think to Eddie's point, IT was in there as a buffer initially, and we were there more just to make sure things went well. But there really haven't been issues, and part of that could be due to Art. You do a very good job communicating, coordinating. But your resources, your end resources are basically knowledgeable in the product. Our business users are knowledgeable. It's easier to communicate, I guess, when you both know the subject you're talking about. Right. But I think that's just always the apprehension. It's like I wanted Eddie to be able to disengage. I was like, I don't want to lose a resource having to handhold the business every upgrade. And it was really nice that you guys were able to do that. It didn't cost me additional, resource time. And, to Eddie's point, this is a tool for the business. They're going to get more value out of it if, they interact directly with you. They don't need Eddie in the middle of it. They know how to test, know how to test. The goal was to get you to talking and, build that trust. And, it's obviously you have. And one thing I guess I do want to call out, I know, after the second, it was actually that second release when we brought on all the other payrolls. I mean, my payroll director, she was apprehensive. The first one, we did the two large payrolls, it ended up working, but she's still like, okay, I don't know. And she came back to me. I mean, and this is where Suneratech really proved they could do it. She came back to me and she told me, I got to eat my words, because I was determined to tell you this is not going to work. And Linda told me every payroll, because on that second payroll, they still were continuing. They were still manually running every payroll because they did not trust you. And
Right.
so they were continuing to regression test on their own. And so they ran every payroll, and they're like, every payroll matches to the penny. It works. I believe you. And then now all they do, the payroll team, all they do is just look at the screenshots. But before, like I said, for the first 2 iterations, they continued to run the payrolls because they had no confidence in the system. And after that second release, they stopped doing that. Now they use the screenshots as they were supposed to, right? The intended. They just got to look at the screenshot and shots and validate that they're seeing what they need. But it's really been a good story.
Excellent. So we only have about 10 more minutes left before the scheduled end time. So I do want to jump in real quick and provide everybody with a quick overview of what Cloud Tester is. So obviously we've been talking about Estes has kind of explained their experience working with Suneratech and the Cloud Tester platform. And some of you might be wondering, what is this whole platform? What is this Cloud Tester? So what Cloud Tester is it's the enterprise testing platform that Suneratech has in the marketplace. Our delivery model is testing as a service, and it's a continuous testing platform. And one of the things that makes the Cloud Tester platform very unique in the marketplace is it's a scriptless solution. So what that means is that the actual product itself, the Cloud Tester platform, is going to go through a process of generating the scripts that do the actual automation. So we go through a capture configure process. Our test engineers work with our customers like Estes to go through that, understanding what the implementation is, whether that's a SaaS application like an Oracle HCM or ERP, whether it be Salesforce or Workday. The application is fairly agnostic to basically what it's testing. So again, we work with, obviously everybody can tell on the call, Estes is an Oracle Cloud customer. So we're doing automation for them of their Oracle Cloud applications, their procurement, HCM, and ERP. But we also work with customers of Workday, HCM, and ERP, Salesforce, SAP, et cetera. And we can also do testing of on-premise applications like Oracle eBusiness Suite or SAP ECC or PeopleSoft, right? So again, very agnostic. The platform is a very holistic solution. And as the Estes team just explained, we can also do web and mobile application testing as well. So we do also work with several customers that are not customers or consumers of a cloud product, but they have proprietary web applications or mobile applications that they want us to test for them. And we're doing that with the Cloud Tester platform, okay? We can also handle integration testings upstream and downstream. That's one of the big keys, particularly with cloud customers, is when they get that patch, they tend to forget about the integrations that are hooked into their cloud application. And that's oftentimes when you have a tight testing window, those sort of integrations tend to get skipped. And with the Cloud Tester platform, we can really build a holistic suite that exercises data flow from start to finish across multiple applications, playing various different roles, so to speak, within those applications, validating permissions, et cetera. So really, when you look at it from a kind of a testing type or a testing type, functional and regression testing, integration testing, we have some very robust capabilities in end-to-end testing. And we can also basically monitor and do a couple flavors of performance testing, whether that be transactional based performance testing of a cloud application where we're monitoring the transaction from release to release, or if we're doing a traditional more of a load and performance testing of a non-cloud application. And then we also have obviously capabilities to do some role-based security testing. Don't think penetration testing, but think custom roles that you may have set up within your on-prem or cloud-based application that you want to ensure from release to release those roles are and permissions are intact, and that you don't have any degradation and users suddenly can't do their job because a patch broke one of your custom permissions or custom roles. Okay. So some of the key features of the Cloud Tester platform before we jump into the Q&A session. It is offered as platform as a service. Our pricing is subscription and consumption based. So that's really depends on the number of scripts we're going to onboard and the number of tests that we're going to run. For many of the packaged applications like Oracle, Workday, SAP, we bring pre-built test scenarios to the party. So we have scenarios. If an organization doesn't have a robust testing suite, we can support that. We can bring pre-built scenarios to the party, like I said, and really recommend, hey, these are scenarios that you could be or should be testing based on your implementation. All of our customers have access to the quality metrics dashboard. So there's no licensing restrictions in terms of who can access the Cloud Tester platform and take a look at the metrics that are available within the platform. We can manage test data in an automated fashion where we're basically kind of mining for data for real time real data that would be used in the test scripts, either through reporting or access to the underlying database. When we talked about the scriptless solution, one of the big aspects of that is and what makes scriptless solutions, more effective and efficient than a traditional testing tool. It's really about speed, and that speed is really noticed within the onboarding period. So Eddie had touched on it a little earlier when he was talking about phase one. Our ability to onboard an average suite of tests for a cloud customer is normally within about 6 weeks, and we work with our customers and commit that from an execution perspective, we will get through the test execution within the first 5 business days of that patch being applied to their test pods or their test environments, right? And then Eddie had actually touched on this quite a bit. The platform itself also generates documentation. All the documentation that we generate is downloadable in a PDF format. So what most of our customers do is they basically leverage that documentation. And because it's auto-generated, it's always up to date. So anytime a change is made to a script, the documentation gets updated as well. And they leverage that downloadable PDF documentation with the screenshots for audit purposes, whether those be internal or external audits that they're required to do by their enterprise or their organization. They can leverage that documentation and point their audit teams to their folder for the particular release and say, there's all the documentation for all the tests that we've run. It is up to date. It is current. It is matching what we did in that test effort. And then, like I said, when changes are mandated, whether it's by the vendor who is pushing a change to, let's say, a workflow, or if there's a new implementation that a client has decided they want to onboard additional scenarios, or they want to change their personalizations or implementation, whenever we execute that script the second time, the documentation gets updated as well. Okay, so real quick, we are running out of time. We only got about 3 minutes left. I'm going to leave this slide up here. Kind of talks a little bit about some of the benefits, obviously, just beyond kind of cost, right? We're talking, we want to ensure test coverage. Most of our customers talk about the speed of adoption is sped up quite a bit. They have the ability to withdraw their folks from the testing effort, and they can focus on what's being delivered by their vendor, and really give them the ability to find the new enhancements, the new features. They're going to help their business be more effective and efficient. Most of our customers report about a 55% reduction in the cost of quality. That's primarily tied to the fact that their business SMEs and their IT support teams don't have to worry about testing anymore because it's handled by the Suneratech team and Cloud Tester. And again, getting through the execution of those of each patch release within the first 5 business days is also critical. It gives us the ability to work through any issues as they come up, work with that particular software vendor, whether it be Oracle or Workday, to address anything that's broken, log service requests, etc. So with that, we'll stay on this slide. But Ramya, I do see some questions have kind of flowed in. Can we jump to the Q&A since we don't have a whole lot of time left?
Sure. So we have a few questions here. The first one is, what is the process when a test fails? Do we need to tell Suneratech that it failed, or do you notify us and work with us to resolve?
Okay, so I think you said when a test fails, how do we handle that? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So when a test does fail, we work with each of our customers to let them know, obviously, that we have a failure. And we don't just throw it over the wall to them. We don't just say, hey, script 1, 2, 3 failed. You guys figure out what the problem is. Within the documentation itself and within the execution results, Any failure that we have is called out at the very beginning of our documentation. And we actually do perform a level of triage when we're working with our customers to basically say, hey, here's what failed. Here's what we think may have happened. Here's all the information that's going to be required to log basically the test steps. So if we need to log an SR, you have the documentation, you have the ability to repeat the steps and really support the effective triage of that failure with the software vendor. So for example, Oracle has an SR process, gives them the ability to very quickly get that SR logged with all the relevant details that are going to be needed for the Oracle team to very quickly triage and remediate that problem.
Okay, so we have another question for the Estes team. So how did Cloud Testers testing as a service help the Estes team?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, basically it saved us a lot of time. It's gotten us improved consistency, right? Every time, when you're doing ad hoc testing, users, basically it's based on how much time they have, right? They're not always testing everything. So saving us time over the estimate for our teams is 450 hours, a quarterly upgrade. And part of that's due to the length of time it takes to run the payrolls. But so we're saving 450 hours, we're getting consistency, we're being able to test multiple browsers and different platforms, PC, iPhone, Android. I mean, that's all stuff we never did before. So a lot of wins.
Great.
Thanks, Aaron. So the next question is, does Suneratech have their own test cases, or customer or SI partner need to provide the test cases that needs to be automated?
Yeah, so kind of as I touched on, Ramya, we do have a pre-built library of scenarios for most of these commercial applications that like I said, we bring to the party. But obviously, we want to work with our customers because the way we go about capturing and configuring the scripts is we are going to capture Estus's implementation, right? So all of the configuration changes, the personalizations that they have made to make that application that they're leveraging work for them, we want to exercise that functionality explicitly. So it is a combination. We do work with some customers that don't really have a testing suite, and that's where that pre-built library comes into play. And then we work with other customers that have a very robust suite, and that's basically where we're just going to be able to leverage that documentation to very quickly onboard them with tests that are specific to their implementation.
Okay. Yeah.
Anything else, Ramya? We're a little bit over time.
There's one last question.
Okay.
Yeah, one last question. So can Cloud Tester automate tests that require multiple logins and levels of approvals for end-to-end flows?
Oh, yeah, great question. So yes, and I think I touched on it briefly. Within that end-to-end testing capabilities, basically we have the ability to really script the tests in a manner that are going to mimic kind of how a business process would flow. Excuse me. So within the scripts themselves and within the automation, we can really exercise and play multiple roles within the automation script itself. So it can start out as user ABC, for example, that's going to perform a particular transaction. Maybe that's going to require an approval from a manager. And we can script it in that manner so that it really does exercising that workflow process across multiple steps. So we can log in as, kind of as a general user. We can log as with someone who has manager approval level. There might be a second or third level of approval that's required. And we can really build it into the script to really make sure that, again, once that patch is deployed, that workflow that organization A has implemented is intact with the proper permissions and the proper user definitions being exercised during that test effort. Okay. Anything else, Ramya?
Yeah, I think the questions are answered. The rest of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we are a little bit over. I do apologize for that. But if you have any other questions, you can contact us. My email is here, where we will post this deck online, and I believe to LinkedIn. In addition, you can find us at suneratech.com/cloudtester, or you can even go to cloudtester.com as well. And we'll be happy to set up any additional calls and answer any additional questions that you may have. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thank you all. Thank you for your time. Thanks for meeting with us. And Estes team, thank you so much for participating with us and sharing your story with the folks on the webinar today. Really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.